Welcome back to another Just My Thoughts. And it's your favorite host, B. Man, I tell you what, for all you sports fans, especially you NFL fans, if that song right there didn't just get your juices, if you ever played, didn't get your juices flowing. Listen, growing up, I was a huge fan of sports, and I talked about that on previous podcasts where my father had us watching every sport you can name of, from football, baseball, basketball, tennis, golf, racing, bowling. You name it, we watched it. And so I at a young age fell in love with the NFL and used to love to watch the old footage. And they would always put this music to it, which is why I opened up the podcast with it. And this particular song is the Over the Hill Gang by Sam Spence. And so today, I want to talk about generational wealth and the impact the NFL has had on it in a couple of different ways. As you all know, even if you're not a fan of the NFL, because it is such a huge enterprise, not only in the United States, but around the entire world, people know when things are going on, because it's usually national, sometimes international news. And so we just had the NFL draft here just a week ago. And I thought I had been wanting to kind of speak a little bit about this for quite some time. But as much as I love the NFL, and as much as I get geared up and love to see the new talent and all of those things and get excited for your team, and I definitely have a favorite team. My team is the Kansas City Chiefs. And for the last 6 to 10 years, basically since Andy Reid has been our coach, I've had a lot to celebrate, and even was able to celebrate a Super Bowl championship, which I did not think that I was going to be able to witness in my lifetime. As I noted in a previous podcast, they hadn't won a Super Bowl since I had been alive. They won one the year before I was born. And as a matter of fact, the funny thing about it is my parents were at the longest game recorded in NFL history, the game between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Miami Dolphins, where the Miami Dolphins outlasted the Kansas City Chiefs in double overtime. So I have a few little ties, in a sense, very, very loose ties. I'm not trying to say anything beyond that. But anyway, I love that song. I used to love to watch some of my favorite teams other than the Kansas City Chiefs. I used to, and it's gone kind of fluctuated throughout the years, but I've been a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I was definitely a San Francisco fan when Joe Montana was there. He actually probably, until Mahomes came along, has always been my favorite quarterback of all time. And probably, you may ask yourself, well, why do I pick that position, that particular individual? Well, I also played quarterback when I was growing up. And so, of course, I'm going to look at that position and players that play at that position. And I just love the way he would methodically just march down the field. And every once in a while, he would also throw, depending on who the receiver was, throw it deep. But he would just methodically move the ball down the field. Him and Roger Craig and the whole slew. I'm not even going to go down the list of people. But anyway, so that song always kind of gets me going. And plus, I'm a lover of music as well, and just kind of the arrangement that goes beyond it. But right now, the NFL is also as celebratory as this last week was, and the new round of faces coming into the league, and everybody on cloud nine from all of that excitement. It's still dealing with a huge issue, and that is the issue of the lawsuit that was brought by originally by Brian Flores. He's been there have been other names that have been added in a lawsuit for basically the hiring processes for African American or minority coaches, head coaches, that is. And if you look at the number of players that are represented, and then you look at the coaching staffs, and then you look at the top layer, which is the head coach, it is very discouraging to see that there aren't enough. We won't even go into the numbers. You can go to NFL.com, you can go to ESPN.com, you can go to a lot of these sports sites and get all the specific numbers. It's beyond the numbers, actually, at this point. It is so blatant that change actually needs to happen now. And those who are the powers that be, being the owners, and even the NFL can put enough pressure on these owners that it needs to stop. And here's the reason why it needs to stop. Because it's very systemic, as much as a lot of the things in this country are systemic. And you'll say, why? Well, I'm going to explain to you why, and I'm going to explain to it in a slightly personal standpoint. So bear with me as I tell you the story, which happens to be my own story. So I won't piggyback off of anyone else. And in this, mind you, I'm talking about generational wealth. So I hope I don't ramble too much, but follow along with me. One of the there's one decision that I made when I was a young person starting to play sports that ensured that effectively eliminated a possibility of me ever playing pro ball was my decision to play quarterback. Well, how did that come about? Well, really quickly, everybody starts out when they're little. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people start out, it's pretty consistent when they're little, they're young in the pee-wee leagues, and I did the same. But my first position was not quarterback. The first position that I ever held was running back, and I actually liked it a lot, but I went through a growth spurt as well. I was 6'3" by the time I was in the 9th grade. So I was taller than most people at that age. There was very few people that were taller than me. And so running back, being that I was very, very thin as well, kind of transitioned. So the second position that I played was tight end. And that's actually pretty decent for the height that I was. But it wasn't very bulky. So while I was able to catch the ball and I was able to block, I tried to be a good blocker. I didn't have really enough, muscle and enough meat on my bones for me to try to make that position last for the long haul. And before my last year in Pee Wee League, the coaches asked me to play quarterback because I was a returning player and one who knew all the plays. So it was kind of just a natural little transition. But every kid has a desire or hope, slight twinkling, because everybody likes to throw the ball. Everybody likes to throw that touchdown pass or run in that touchdown. adrenaline, excitement that goes with it. And you know, everybody knows that the quarterback gets mad attention, whether you want it or not, whether you've done good or not, whether you should get the credit or not. You get the attention. Two positions on a team that garner the most attention: your head coach and the quarterback. At that young age, I really hadn't even processed me becoming the quarterback. But in doing so, I really enjoyed playing it, the position itself. And so I continued. Once I got to high school, we really didn't have a junior high team, so that was kind of it in transition to high school. And when I got to high school, I honestly really had not noticed what I know now. And so I was a part of a team. Freshmen play, obviously freshmen. But I was advanced up to the varsity as a sophomore. And so I played on the varsity as a sophomore, as a junior, and as a senior. I was a backup as a sophomore. But I was a part of a team that went 7-3 my sophomore year. We went 8-2 and went to the playoffs in my junior year. And again repeated with a 10-0 record in my senior year. I started, I believe it was one game my sophomore year. And although it was as a punishment, I believe, if I recall correctly, for the starting quarterback, that probably wouldn't have happened. But hey, it was a start underneath my belt. Now come to my junior year, we had some transition. We had a couple of seniors and then myself as a junior. And I believe it was the third game. By the third game, I had won the starting job and played through the rest of that season and only had one loss, which was a loss that we had in the last game of the season to our cross-city rival down the street, basically. I should say a cross-district rival. And we lost that game 10-6. Close game. And we had to turn around and play that same team the next week in the playoffs. Now, we shared the same field. So, and that field was actually on the property of the high school that I went to. But we ended up, because of losing that last game, having to be on the opposing sideline. That was probably and should have been an ominous thing for me. But I wasn't thinking of that in that moment. And right before the game, not during the week, leading up, right before the game, myself and the backup quarterback were informed that I would not be starting, but the backup would be starting in the game. I wasn't injured and had not, to my knowledge, done anything throughout the week that would garner me being benched. We left the locker room. I was so shell-shocked is kind of like the word that I guess that I could use that would kind of represent. You're kind of like in a fog. Like you see what's going on, but you don't necessarily believe what's going on. So we get out there doing warm-ups and it's just kind of like this eeriness. Game starts and I'm standing on the sidelines, and literally throughout the entire game,